I tell you that the type of writer that I would be, because I've written some like fan fiction stuff on the side, nothing that I'm ever going to release, so don't ask me about it. And my downfall as a creative writer is I'll write something out that I'll be like, oh, this sounds cool. Yeah, this is kind of a cool concept. I'll get to it, and I'll get to the point where it's like almost at the point where it's really cool and really fun, and it kind of has a big reveal. Go ahead, I can cut it. She got you a water.
Yeah,
I got
cool.
you one too.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. And I'll be like, yeah, this is going to be really cool. And then I'll start overthinking it. And I'm like, this is stupid. And I'll just delete the whole thing. And I'm like, this is going to be dumb. People are going to laugh at me. None of this makes any sense. And it doesn't matter anyway. This is a stupid waste of time.
Well, the secret to writing is that you have to write badly. So like you get something on paper that's bad, and then the actual writing comes in the rewriting. So as long as you have something to work with, it's kind of like when you're molding something from clay. At first it's going to be blocky and ugly, but then like as you start chipping away at it and getting more detail, it starts becoming good. So most people, they'll try to get it right at the start, but it's more important to get it just on the page and have it be bad. And then go back and be like, okay, I know this is bad. How can I fix it? And then like you start rewriting and getting it better. And that's something that a lot of people who try to write don't realize. And that's why a lot of people get stuck.
That's good advice.
And but the biggest thing this week that really pissed me off, since we're talking about writing, is there was an editor from Del Rey Publishing who has the Star Wars license. And he put out a tweet, and he said, if you think that the toxicity of the Star Wars fan base hasn't affected our ability to find writers who want to write for Star Wars, you'd be seriously mistaken. And I had to tweet back at him. I was like, there are tons of really good sci-fi writers that, would kill to write for Star Wars, that would write stories that the Star Wars fan base loves and respects, and who would respect the fan base, these writers. But they're all indie publishers who you don't care about because they're not part of your gate-kept, big traditional publishing system.
I'm sure that hits home pretty hard for you.
And he responded to me. He said, this isn't the conversation we're having. And I'm like, well, it's a conversation we should be having because you just said that you're having a hard time finding Star Wars writers. And I literally told you where you could find people who would bend over backwards to write an official Star Wars novel.
Yeah.
And it's kind of that same like Lucasfilm Disney mentality where it's like, if you're not part of the in crowd, if you're not part of like
they have a clique.
Yeah, the
you can tell they
clique.
have a clique too, and it's the same thing. And was it Matt Martin or something like that? He was one of the Star Wars writers. Somebody had sent him Shadowversity's YouTube video about the Force. I didn't watch it because I saw the thumbnail and I was like, I've probably.
I love Shadowversity.
I do too. I was just listening to his YouTube video about the longbow and right versus left arrow shooting. Like it's a totally off topic. Has nothing to do with
his
it.
fight scene breakdowns are fantastic.
Yeah, his fight scene breakdowns are really good because he actually has knowledge of fencing and sword fighting. So it's really cool to listen to him. I love Shadowversity, but I saw the thumbnail with Luke like screaming no, and it says the Force is dead, and I'm like, I've probably heard this argument a million times. I don't really want to listen to a 40-minute conversation about it. So that's why I didn't watch the video. But somebody had sent that to the writer from Lucasfilm, and the guy from Lucasfilm was like, I don't watch Star Wars YouTube videos, and I'm like, maybe you should.
Yeah.
I'm like, I get it. I really do get it. I want to defend him a little bit because I also get kind of sick and tired of the constant YouTube video. Star Wars is kind of crappy right now. Video, like just the format's kind of like old for me. It's cliche at this point. And I'm like looking at it and I'm like, I don't know if I should blame him, but at the same time, they're doing such a terrible job for the most part. There's a couple of gems in there as far as the writing goes. Claudia Gray, I think, is one of the exceptions to this whole Lucasfilm thing. I think her books are really well done. But I'm like, they need to be able to see some of the criticism that's coming their way. Otherwise, they're just in this bubble, and they have no idea that the fan base is like crying out to them, like, hey, we need something better. And they're just like, no, we're not going to watch that because I don't know. To kind of put this in perspective for you, if somebody were to just obliterate Earthman Jack with video after video of how shitty it is and how this and that and how this should be different and how this betrays Jack's character, blah, 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 for like the last 4 years, would you be like, yeah, I'm going to listen to every single one of them to try and get an idea how I can improve? Or are you going to be like, no, this is my vision and I need to be in my own space to create? I'm not going to listen to some jackhole on YouTube.
No, I definitely do that because, so like I'll read every bad review. in fact, I have a process where I have a team of beta readers, and they're the harshest critics I could possibly find. And so like I have them read my books before they're published. And I give them questionnaires to fill out to give me specific like critiques on my work. And what I do is I look for patterns, because sometimes like if there's an individual who doesn't like something, that comes down to personal taste. But if there are patterns where you have more than one person who agrees with the criticism, then that means that it's probably valid.
Yeah.
So I use this team of my harshest critics to critique my work. And then I go back and I say like, what do I agree with? What don't I agree with? And then I choose what to change at the end of the day. And I think it makes my story stronger. And as a professional artist, there's this mentality, and I saw this all the time when I worked in Hollywood.
Worked in Hollywood.
Wait. Well, wait.
3, 2, 1.
Back in
Hollywood. Oh,
God damn it. Get your line right. Ready?
What is it?
3. It's back.
Back. Okay.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. Back in Hollywood.
Yes. Where basically a lot of artists, professional artists, are very insecure, and they have huge egos. And so any type of criticism will trigger them, and it'll send them into a depression spiral, and they won't be able to deal with life and work and stuff. So there's this mentality out there that if you cut yourself off from criticism, you're able to function as a normal human being, or at least like continue working. And so a lot of these big Hollywood people, because of their ego and because of their fragile, self-esteem and stuff like that, they'll specifically avoid all criticism, and they'll just take critiques from people who are like kind of close to them, but they're all in their own bubble. So like the criticism like doesn't exist because you're afraid to insult someone to their face. So you have this, this kind of mentality in, the publishing industry, the writing industry, the TV movie business industry, where people are afraid to actually offer salient critiques, and all the people who are doing the good critiques are being ignored because people just don't want to listen to them. And because of that, you don't really see a whole lot of evolution of these artists. In fact, the more isolated one gets, the worse people's stuff gets. Like you saw with the prequels, for instance, the Star Wars prequels, where if you look at the documentaries for that, George Lucas had no one around him.
He surrounded himself with yes.
No one around him to tell him his ideas were bad, or if his ideas were bad. Whereas with the original trilogy, he had Gary Kurtz, who would be there at Lucas's side and be like, "No, this is dumb. We got." Or
even this. Irving too. Yeah. Irving told him multiple times.
Kushner, yeah. So there's that whole mentality out there that I can't listen to criticism because it's going to wreck me, so I'm just going to choose to ignore it. But I think that the stuff we're seeing from the Lucasfilm end of things is even worse than that, because they just dismiss all criticism as being toxic. So it's automatically invalid, as opposed to actually bothering to try to sit down and take it in.
In their defense, I will say this. A lot of the criticism that they're getting, even though whether or not it's valid or not is based off of opinion, it might be based on some kind of a fact, but the format in which it's given would be considered toxic. It's not like, hey, this is a valid criticism that I have. It's very like these are the reasons why I don't like it, this and this and this. But no, it's sensationalized to get clicks. It's sensationalized to be entertaining. And it's made to the point where it's like, I wouldn't want to, even as somebody who's not being critiqued myself, I wouldn't want to listen to it because it's so over the top.
The thing is, though, is like when you spot people like that, you can dismiss their criticism if it's obviously sensationalized. Because you can just say like, okay, well, I know what this person's doing, and so I don't think I'm going to get anything out of watching their critique. Whereas like if you look at someone like, Mahler, for instance, Mahler, who does the EFAP, Every Frame a Pause podcast, which are like anywhere between 5 and 10 hours long, but he has like a panel where like they go through and they critique things like really in depth, and his stuff isn't toxic. It's actually very valid if you have the time to actually sit there and go through it.
Yeah, that's one of the things I had with Shad, like Shadiversity's YouTube channel. I don't think he has a video that's under 20 minutes long.
But I mean, like even some of the sensational guys, like for instance Doomcock. I know you don't like Doomcock. He's one of my favorite YouTubers. But like I'll sit there and I'll watch his critiques on stuff, and even though like his critiques are very sensationalized, he makes extremely good points. And so you can get something from these like outrage merchants, even though you may not like how they deliver it, but they do have like, valid points.